You know that feeling when they say they miss the old you, that bright, agreeable version who smiled through everything, the one who never said no, never rocked the boat, never let the mask slip to show what was really underneath. They loved that version of you, the perfect friend, the dedicated worker, the one who kept everyone else comfortable while slowly disappearing inside. But that wasn't really you, was it? That was the carefully constructed persona you built to survive, the airbrushed self-portrait you painted to keep them happy, to keep them close, to feel worthy of love. You remember how it started, those subtle hints in childhood that certain parts of you were too much. Your sensitivity, your depth, your questions about everything, the way you felt things so intensely while others seemed to float on the surface. So you learned to filter yourself, to dim your light, to speak in acceptable whispers instead of your full voice. Layer by layer, year by year, you crafted the mask, the perfect daughter, the low-maintenance friend, the team player who never complained. You became so good at being what everyone needed that you almost forgot who you were beneath it all. Almost. But something in you kept whispering, a quiet voice beneath the performance saying, "This isn't you. This isn't real. You're still in here, waiting to be seen." Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he never said how much it would hurt to let the mask crack, to stop being the version of yourself that everyone preferred, to finally admit that their love was conditional. They loved the persona, not the person. You see it now in their reactions when you start speaking your truth. The subtle withdrawal when you set boundaries. The confusion when you no longer laugh at jokes that diminish you. The accusations that you've changed, as if your authenticity is a betrayal of their comfort. They say you're different now. More serious? Less fun? What they really mean is you're no longer performing the role they assigned you. You're no longer contorting yourself to fit their narrative. You're no longer sacrificing your truth to maintain their illusions. This is the painful paradox of awakening. As you become more real, some relationships reveal themselves as having been based on fiction. They didn't fall in love with your essence. They fell in love with your adaptation, your survival strategy, your carefully curated highlight reel. The mask served its purpose. It protected you when you needed protection. It helped you belong when belonging felt like oxygen. It gave you a way to navigate a world that wasn't ready for your depth. But now, it's suffocating you. Now, it's become a prison instead of a shelter. You feel it in your body, the exhaustion of maintaining an image that no longer fits. The tension of holding back your wisdom, your power, your natural way of being. The grief of realizing that some people preferred you when you were half alive, playing small, making yourself digestible for their comfort. But here's what they don't tell you about removing the mask. It's not just about revealing who you are, it's about discovering who you are. Because beneath all those layers of adaptation and performance, there's a self waiting to be known. A voice waiting to be heard, a power waiting to be embodied. This is where the real journey begins, not in crafting a better mask, but in gathering the courage to live without one, to let yourself be seen in all your complexity, your light and shadow, your strength and vulnerability, your clarity and your questions. Some will call this selfish. They'll say you've changed, become difficult, lost your way. But what they're really saying is, we preferred you when you were lost. when you were disconnected from your truth, when your primary purpose was making us comfortable with our own masks. The truth is, you haven't become someone different. You've become more fully yourself. You're no longer editing your soul to fit into someone else's story. You're no longer apologizing for taking up space, for having needs, for being human instead of a carefully curated hologram. This is what they don't understand. The mask wasn't you. It was a shield, a survival strategy, a way to navigate a world that often punishes authenticity. But now, you're strong enough to lower that shield, to risk being seen, to risk being real. You're learning that real love doesn't require performance. Real connection doesn't demand that you shrink. Real belonging doesn't ask you to abandon yourself at the door. Yes, some relationships will fall away. Some people will miss the version of you that was easier to control, easier to predict, easier to keep small. Let them. Their discomfort with your authenticity is not your burden to carry. The mask served its purpose. It protected you when you needed protection. But now, it's time to let it crack, to let the light of your true self shine through, to discover who you are beyond all the roles you've played, all the expectations you've tried to meet, all the boxes you've tried to fit into. This is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you've always been. The self that existed before the world taught you to hide. The voice that spoke before you learned to whisper. The soul that danced before you learned to walk carefully. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The mask became your unconscious way of moving through the world, an automatic response to pain, to rejection, to the fear of being too much or not enough. But now you're making it conscious. You're seeing how this protection became a prison, how this adaptation became an abandonment of self, how this performance became a betrayal of your own truth. The unmasking is not a single moment, but a gradual awakening. Each time you speak your truth instead of what they want to hear, each time you honor your boundaries instead of bending to keep the peace, each time you choose authenticity over approval. Some days, it feels like falling, like you're losing everything you built your life around, but you're not falling. You're returning, coming home to yourself, learning to trust the voice that was always there beneath the performance. This is what real love looks like. Not the conditional acceptance of your masked self, but the courage to be seen in your full humanity. Not the shallow approval of your perfect performance, but the deep recognition of your authentic essence. You're learning that the right people will love you not despite your truth, but because of it. They'll celebrate your awakening instead of mourning your compliance. They'll welcome your depth instead of demanding your surface. The mask kept you safe, but safety isn't the same as freedom. Protection isn't the same as power. Survival isn't the same as truly living. So let them miss the old you. Let them long for the version that never questioned, never challenged, never outgrew their expectations. That version was never really you. It was a character you played until you were strong enough to be real. Now you're learning to trust your voice even when it shakes, to take up space even when it feels uncomfortable, to be seen even when it feels vulnerable. This is not selfishness. It's self-reclamation. It's not rebellion. It's return. You're not becoming someone new. You're unveiling who you've always been, the depth they called too much, the sensitivity they called weakness, the wisdom they dismissed as complexity. It was all you, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be lived. This is your permission to let the mask crack, to let your truth emerge, to let yourself be seen not as they want you to be, but as you actually are. Some will fall away, some will resist, some will try to shame you back into smallness, but you're not here to make everyone comfortable anymore. You're here to be real, to be whole, to embody your truth, even if it disturbs the false peace of others. Let them love the mask if they must, but you're learning to love what's beneath it, the raw, real, unedited version of yourself that never needed fixing, never needed polishing, never needed to be anything other than what it is. This is your homecoming, your return to self, your reclamation of all the parts you were taught to hide. It's messy and beautiful and terrifying and true. And it's the most important journey you'll ever take, the journey back to yourself. So let the mask crack. Let your light shine through. Let yourself be seen, really seen, maybe for the first time. Because the love that's waiting on the other side of authenticity, that's the love you've been looking for all along. Not the love of your performance, but the love of your essence. Not the approval of your adaptation, but the recognition of your soul. You're not just removing a mask, you're remembering who you were before you needed one. And that remembering, that's the real revolution. That's the real return. That's the real love story. The one between you and your own truth. Finally set free. And now you're noticing something strange happening. As the mask cracks, as you allow more of your true self to emerge, you're experiencing both loss and liberation. The people who loved your performance are pulling away, but new connections are forming, deeper ones, based on authenticity rather than appearance. You're discovering that truth has its own magnetic field. When you stop pretending, you naturally attract others who are also done with the masquerade. People who can handle your depth, who aren't threatened by your growth, who don't need you to make yourself smaller, to make them feel bigger. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole. It's not about perfection, it's about integration. Bringing all the parts of yourself into the light, even the ones that don't fit neatly into social expectations. You're learning that the pain of authenticity is cleaner than the pain of pretense. Yes, it hurts when people walk away because you're no longer playing their game. But it hurts more to abandon yourself, to live as a fraction of who you are, to keep performing for conditional love. The mask was heavy, wasn't it? All those years of monitoring your words, filtering your feelings, making sure you didn't appear too intense, too sensitive, too different. The constant vigilance of maintaining an acceptable image. The exhaustion of being everyone's idea of okay while your soul was screaming for expression. But now, you're feeling something new. The lightness that comes with being real. The energy that returns when you're not spending it all on performance. The clarity that emerges when you stop trying to be what everyone else needs and start listening to what your spirit actually wants. You're noticing how the right people respond to your authenticity. They're not put off by your depth. They're drawn to it. They don't need you to wear a mask because they've done their own work of removing theirs. They recognize the courage it takes to be real in a world that rewards pretense. This is what genuine connection feels like. Being seen and accepted not for your performance, but for your presence. Not for what you do, but for who you are. Not for how well you meet others' expectations, but for how truly you express your own essence. The unmasking is teaching you about real strength. Not the kind that comes from perfect performance, but the kind that comes from radical authenticity. The strength to say, "This is who I am," without apology. The strength to let relationships transform or end rather than compromise your truth. You're learning to trust the discomfort. When someone says you're too much, you're beginning to hear it differently. Too much for whom? Too much compared to what? Too much according to whose standards? The very qualities they call excessive are often your gifts, your power, your medicine for the world. The mask was built on the belief that you needed to be fixed, that your natural state wasn't acceptable, that you had to earn love through performance. But now you're discovering that your authentic self is not a problem to be solved. It's a power to be embraced. You're remembering all the times you dimmed your light to make others comfortable. All the times you swallowed your truth to keep the peace. All the times you played small to maintain relationships that, in retrospect, were based on your willingness to be less than who you are. But here's what's beautiful about the unmasking. As you stop performing, you start attracting people who are ready for reality. People who aren't looking for a performance, but for presence. Who aren't seeking perfection, but authenticity. Who don't need you to be anything other than who you are. This is the paradox of removing the mask. What feels like falling apart is actually falling together. What looks like losing yourself is actually finding yourself. What seems like the end of love is actually the beginning of real love, the kind that doesn't require performance or pretense. You're learning to distinguish between love and approval, between connection and compliance, between relationships that nourish your soul and ones that feed off your performance. It's a different way of moving through the world, leading with truth instead of adaptation. The mask was a brilliant survival strategy. It helped you navigate difficult waters. It protected you when you needed protection. But now, it's time to thank it for its service and let it go. Because you're ready for something more than survival. You're ready for living. This is what they don't tell you about authenticity. It's not just about being yourself, it's about discovering yourself. As the mask dissolves, you're meeting parts of yourself you forgot existed. The wild creativity, the fierce wisdom, the unapologetic joy, the sacred anger, all the pieces that couldn't fit within the confines of your persona. You're learning that real strength isn't about maintaining a perfect image. It's about being willing to be seen in your wholeness, your light and shadow, your certainty and doubt, your power and vulnerability. It's about trusting that your authentic self is enough, even when it doesn't fit someone else's expectations. The unmasking is revealing something profound. You don't actually need everyone to understand you. You don't need universal approval. You don't need to be everybody's cup of tea. You just need to be real, to be true, to be authentic in your expression of life. This is what Jung meant when he spoke about the self, not the carefully constructed ego, but the deeper, truer identity that emerges when we stop performing and start being. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you've always been. You're noticing how different it feels to speak from this place of authenticity. Your words carry more weight because they're not filtered through layers of performance. Your presence has more impact because it's not diluted by pretense. Your connections have more depth because they're based on truth rather than image. The mask promised safety but delivered imprisonment. It offered belonging, but at the cost of authenticity. It provided protection, but prevented growth. Now, you're choosing a different path, the path of truth, of realness, of showing up as you are rather than as others want you to be. This is your invitation to trust the unmasking process, to believe that what emerges when you stop performing will be more beautiful, more powerful, more real than any mask you could wear. To trust that the right people will love you not for your performance, but for your presence. You're learning that authenticity is not a destination, but a practice. Each day brings new opportunities to choose truth over pretense, realness over performance, authenticity over approval. Each interaction is a chance to show up as you are rather than as others expect you to be. The mask served its purpose. It protected you when you needed protection. But now it's time for something more. Time for truth. Time for power. Time for the real you to emerge in all your complex, beautiful, imperfect glory. Let them miss the mask if they must. Let them long for the version of you that was easier to control, easier to predict, easier to keep small. But don't let their nostalgia for your performance pull you back into pretense. You've come too far. You've grown too much. You've remembered too much of who you really are. This is your permission to be real, to be seen, to be known, not as they want you to be, but as you actually are. Some will fall away, some will resist, some will try to shame you back into smallness. But you're not here to make everyone comfortable anymore. You're here to be true. The unmasking is not just about removing what's false. It's about revealing what's real. It's about trusting that your authentic self is not too much, not too intense, not too different, but exactly what's needed in a world starving for truth. So let them love the mask if they must. But you're learning to love what's beneath it. The raw, real, unedited version of yourself that never needed fixing, never needed polishing, never needed to be anything other than what it is. This is your homecoming, your return to self, your reclamation of all the parts you were taught to hide. It's messy and beautiful and terrifying and true. And it's the most important journey you'll ever take, the journey back to yourself. The mask kept you safe, but safety isn't the same as freedom. Protection isn't the same as power. Survival isn't the same as truly living. You're ready now for something more than survival. Ready for truth, ready for power, ready for life in all its messy, beautiful, authentic glory. Let the unmasking continue. Let your truth emerge. Let yourself be seen, really seen, maybe for the first time. Because the love that's waiting on the other side of authenticity, that's the love you've been looking for all along. Not the love of your performance, but the love of your essence. Not the approval of your adaptation, but the recognition of your soul. This is your time, your moment of return, your sacred remembering of who you were before the world taught you to hide. Trust it, follow it. Let it lead you home to yourself. The mask served its purpose, but now it's time to let it crack, to let it fall, to let your light shine through. Because you're not just removing a mask, you're remembering who you were before you needed one. And that remembering, that's the real revolution. That's the real return. That's the real love story. The one between you and your own truth finally set free. The journey of unmasking isn't linear. Some days you'll feel the exhilarating freedom of authenticity, and others you'll feel the gravitational pull of the old patterns, the urge to slip back into performance, to make yourself palatable, to choose approval over truth. These moments of doubt are not failures. They're opportunities to choose yourself again, to remember why you started this journey of authenticity in the first place. Because living behind a mask might feel safer, but it's not really living at all. You're discovering that authenticity has its own kind of safety, not the safety of walls and masks, but the safety of knowing who you are and standing firmly in that truth. The safety of relationships built on realness rather than performance. The safety of belonging to yourself first. Jung wrote about the importance of accepting our own nature, saying, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But what he didn't explicitly say is that this acceptance becomes easier when we realize the alternative, the exhaustion of perpetual performance, the loneliness of being loved for who we're not. The people who truly belong in your life are the ones who can handle your evolution. They don't need you to stay small for their comfort. They don't require you to wear a mask for their security. They welcome your growth because they're growing too. You're learning that real connection happens in the spaces where masks fall away, in the vulnerable moments of showing up as you are, in the courage of speaking your truth even when your voice shakes, in the quiet power of being seen and accepted for who you actually are. The unmasking process is teaching you something profound about love, both self-love and the love we share with others. Real love doesn't require performance. It doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't need you to be anything other than what you are. This is what freedom feels like, not the absence of challenge or difficulty, but the presence of truth. The ability to move through the world as yourself, not as a carefully constructed image. The power to speak your truth, feel your feelings, and live your life without apologizing for your existence. You're noticing how different it feels to live from this place of authenticity. Your relationships might be fewer, but they're deeper. Your words might be quieter, but they carry more weight. Your presence might be simpler, but it's more powerful. The mask promised safety, but delivered imprisonment. It offered belonging, but at the cost of authenticity. It provided protection, but prevented growth. Now, you're choosing a different path, the path of truth, of realness, of showing up as you are rather than as others want you to be. This is your invitation to trust the unmasking process completely, to believe that what emerges when you stop performing will be more beautiful, more powerful, more real than any mask you could wear, to trust that the right people will love you not for your performance, but for your presence. Remember this, the world doesn't need another perfect performance. It needs your truth, your authenticity, your unique way of being human. The very qualities they call too much are often exactly what's needed in a world starving for realness. So let them miss the mask. Let them long for the version of you that was easier to control, easier to predict, easier to keep small. But don't let their nostalgia for your performance pull you back into pretense. You've come too far. You've grown too much. You've remembered too much of who you really are. This is your permission to be real, to be seen, to be known, not as they want you to be, but as you actually are. Some will fall away, some will resist, some will try to shame you back into smallness. But you're not here to make everyone comfortable anymore. You're here to be true. The unmasking is not just about removing what's false. It's about revealing what's real. It's about trusting that your authentic self is not too much, not too intense, not too different, but exactly what's needed in a world desperate for truth. You're not just removing a mask, you're remembering who you were before you needed one. And that remembering, that's the real revolution. That's the real return. That's the real love story. The one between you and your own truth. Finally set free. This is your time, your moment of return, your sacred remembering of who you were before the world taught you to hide. Trust it. Follow it. Let it lead you home to yourself. Because in the end, the most powerful thing you can be is simply, unapologetically, authentically you. Not the mask they loved, not the performance they preferred, but the raw, real, unedited truth of who you are. And that truth, it's more than enough. It always was.